All right, everybody, welcome back. We are live and in the buff for the first time in 2 weeks. It's been a bit of a rough ride for trying to get this thing going. Um, we missed last week due
Why
to
did we miss last week,
we
Sal?
missed we missed because there was a hurricane coming through Florida. Hurricane Matthew messed everything up for us.
So
Um,
first of all, let's ask you, are you okay? How did everything
yes,
go? What's going on? Give us the
we
update.
we're all okay here. Families, everyone's safe. Um, this was the first time that I had ever boarded up windows for a hurricane, so that was kind of it was a bit worrying. And then my dad told me it was the first time he'd ever boarded up windows for a hurricane too, and you know he's almost twice as old as I am.
Wow.
He's a baby boomer. He's you know um, so yeah, that's it was a big deal, and then so we all my computer equipment was kind of stored away, and just kind of away from windows and places where it could potentially be damaged. So that's a big part of why the show was canceled. Was because the computer was all tucked away. So because we still had power that night, but the next day we were out, and the next morning we didn't have any power, and the power was out in the house for over 27 hours.
Wow.
So it was pretty crazy around here. Um, but we survived, and I'm glad that it's over.
So you totally have a new perspective.
I do have a bit of a new perspective. I kind of the according to what they were telling us on the news, on the weather, the worst parts of it came through in the middle of the night. Um, so was lucky enough that I managed to sleep through it. But the worst of it for us, was A, the power being out, and B, there were just leaves and sticks everywhere. It wasn't as bad as it could have been, at least not for us. There are other places who aren't as lucky, of course. And I've heard that there are places even in town that are still without power, but I don't know anybody who still doesn't have power. Um, so longest I've heard from people I've actually interacted with was a couple days that they were without power. But other than that, it was not as bad as it could have been. So
And at least you didn't have to build your own shelter.
right. I would have had to, take what I've seen on TV and put it to good use. And I don't know how well I would have done at that. We don't have
Yeah,
a lot of bamboo in our neighborhood. Before we get to episode 3, which was last week, we do have a thing coming up where we haven't nailed down the dates yet for this, but we do want to have a special show just for kind of a Q&A on naturism. We talked about it a little bit a couple weeks ago when during our first show, but we didn't really get to explain everything, and there's a lot to talk about just on naturism alone. So we're working on bringing in some guests for the show. Still working on nailing down those dates. Keep your ears open because that's coming up. Anything to add, Rob?
Sounds good.
Sounds good. Yeah. There's They'll. I think that'll be a very fun event, and like I said, there is a lot to talk about within the subject of naturism by itself. So let's go ahead and jump right in, and episode 3 was last week, so let's. I think we should probably hit on that first. Last week they had the summit, which was
So we were predicting that it was going to be some kind of a switch up. I think was where we left.
Yeah, we were. It was,
so it wasn't quite like
the previous episode had advertised it as a twist.
Yeah,
and we saw them drawing rocks within their tribe. Assumed that there was going to be some kind of a switch up. It never happened, and it was a little disappointing and kind of anticlimactic, in my opinion. What do you think was the point, Rob?
I think it was because I think the idea was to get them to interact initially to see where they'd be, but it ended up being just sort of blah. Don't you think?
I completely agree with you. I feel
like
there wasn't a point.
Yeah, there was no point. And the millennials lied through their teeth because the real moment that could have made a difference was when the other team was so is there anybody that has a showmance or any whatever? And so
right.
Biggie and Taylor were sitting right there, and they're like, no. And they all just let it pass.
Yeah, well, that's because they were all sitting right there. That alliance was sitting right there, and they were deny. But even
it couldn't have been a worse. It couldn't have been a worse combination of people, I think, to send for the whole thing. Because if it had been mixed up more, I think that stuff probably would have come out. So if Iggy and Taylor wouldn't have been there, for example.
Oh yeah, for sure. But even Jay understood the importance of taking out showmances and not letting duos make it through the game.
Right. But he knows
he made a comment before the summit. He was like, I really hope Taylor and Figgy don't start making out because then they'll think we're really stupid.
Yeah, that was a good comment.
That was probably the best comment of the episode.
Yeah, definitely.
The other thing that I noticed is for the third episode in a row, we see David, just blindly trusting people. Talking to Taylor and Figgy. Hey, if there's a swap, let's work together. I trust you. And he told that to Chris and Brett in episode 1, and then to Ken straight away in episode 2 as soon as he found his idol, and now he's throwing. It seems like he's throwing blind trust at everybody.
Yeah, well, I think the point or the interesting thing about David, he is playing hard already, way hard, and we'll get into it more when we get to the next episode.
Yeah.
This week, he's all over the place.
He certainly is. It's so hard to keep up. It's almost hard to keep up with David.
I got very confused this week, actually, for a minute.
Oh man, David really is. He's playing a hard game. He's playing to win right out of the gate, I think.
But he's doing pretty well. Surprised. I didn't really give him much of a chance from the first episode or when I saw his interview initially. So I'm actually kind of surprised how well he's doing so far, considering.
He's in just a few days, he seems to have expanded his comfort zone. Because we saw in like the first episode where he's got his fingers in his ears and he's wincing every time the machete hits the bamboo.
Yeah.
They're trying to build the shelter. No help at all. And all of a sudden, he's kind of he's here. He's playing. We'll see how far it takes him though.
Totally.
So, but what do you think about last week's immunity challenge?
So that was the where they walked across the
balance beam holding a 40-pound bag of coconuts and sandbags.
Yeah, I never understand when I don't remember the exact rules, but like so the big thing was it Cece or was it Michaela or who's the one that went so slowly?
That Cece.
Cece
took a very long time walking across, and I think for so many seasons of Survivor, it's been everybody has to get across with their bag, and I think this is the first time they've implemented this type of rule change.
Right, because they could choose who was going across.
Yeah, I mean, they could let one person carry all 5 bags if they had wanted to.
But they never seem to choose very well.
Gen X has some problems.
Well, and we'll talk about it more in the immunity challenge this week, too. A little bit, I think, because at least one of their choices, I don't know.
Yeah, I think I know where you're going with that, and I agree with you. But we'll get there. We've got a lot to talk about, and hopefully, I don't want to just like fly through this and jump all around.
But yeah, that totally it stunted them. I mean, obviously, so they just couldn't make up for it. So.
They almost caught up when it was time to start building the puzzle. If you watch the episode again, when it's when all the pieces of the puzzle are knocked down, they're almost at the same spot. Both tribes are. So it did come down a bit to. I think it did come down to the puzzle, but it was they couldn't make up that lost time. But then Jay had an interesting proposition. He wanted to trade the comfort reward for fishing gear.
Right, and then the other team said no. Smart move, I think.
I agree. I was a little confused though, because it sounded like Jay was just saying, "Oh, let me trade the comfort for fishing gear." And we've seen trades happen in the past. We know that that's not a huge deal. That's something that's doable. But it almost felt like, from Jeff's perspective, he thought they were asking to trade for the Gen X's fishing gear, and because it just felt a little weird and awkward and confusing to me, based on just the way it all went down.
Well, and didn't Jeff say, like, you can negotiate, but it's going to take more or something than just trading the reward for?
Jeff thought that Jeff didn't think that the comfort reward was enough
itself. Was enough
by itself to trade for fishing gear. I don't
remember them asking the other team though, like, to decide, because isn't that how it ended up? Like, the other team decided.
That's what happened this time. It was just.
It seems like in the past it's been like Jeff deciding, okay, yeah, we could do that,
right.
and then in turn passing, is the other team okay with that, and they just say yes or whatever. But
yeah, it's weird. It's Survivor's an odd game because we have to, and I think it's just because Jeff puts a lot on the castaways to make their own rules, and they get to decide what's fair, and how they want to play after after the production has fixed everything else.
In some ways, it's kind of interesting because it's a more fluid, evolving gameplay in some ways, like with that kind of stuff, compared to other shows. Big Brother's pretty set in the way it goes, but like how things have changed. We talked about it last time, how just finding the idols, and more idols, and like how things have evolved over time. I think Survivor is a bit more fluid.
So you would say that between Survivor and Big Brother, that Survivor is the millennials of reality shows?
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, Big Brother says they always mix it up and it's expect the unexpected, but it's like you're expecting to expect it. You know what I mean?
Right. I think this is completely off topic, but I think the best twist that Big Brother could do next would be to have zero twists. Because that would throw the house guests off so much. Because they keep expecting something, and then nothing happens.
Right. Maybe. I think you're onto something there. Don't expect anything this year.
That's a brilliant idea. Okay, so we've the other okay, so at tribal council.
Okay.
Let's talk about you versus you. The word you versus the letter U. I feel like that was
right, with the texting. That was a weird conversation.
That was a weird conversation that I feel like Jeff really forced into there.
I think
it was like, here, talk about this, talk about this.
I think in general, don't you? I think maybe they're trying to force the whole millennial Gen X thing a little too hard at times, and that was a good example of it.
Mm-hmm.
But the obvious question is, Zach, when you text,
I type everything out. I promise.
I think every once in a while, if I'm really lazy or don't tell anybody, but if I'm driving or something,
I think the letter U was used more in the teen years. It's not. I don't think it's necessarily a millennial thing. I think it's a teenager thing because they do that because it's
right. So when you used to write your love notes to whoever, you used to write "I love you."
I heart you.
Yeah, heart you.
I heart you. That's the old love notes that nobody ever got. No, I actually spent a lot of time on AOL Instant Messenger back in the day.
Ooh, yeah. Wow.
But I never even used the letter U on there. But I still abbreviated U. I just did YU. I just dropped the O.
I also think it's kind of a weird question because in the past, I never took typing, for example, or keyboarding or whatever they call it. So some people use those shortcuts because they couldn't physically do it, type quickly enough. But I think that's really changed because little kids can type faster than I can.
Oh yeah, well when
when you see a dinosaur using a cell phone, i.e. a 60-year-old or whatever, and they're using their single digit.
they're like the sloth in Zootopia.
Oh my gosh. I just watched that a couple weekends ago.
That's the best movie ever.
The sloths really make that movie.
That's but no, when cell phones first came out, and they had the flip phones, and you hit the numbers so many times when you're texting. You could text while the phone was still in your pocket because you knew where the numbers were, and you knew how many times you had to hit it for a letter and how long you had to wait before you could move on to the next letter. And I did that plenty of times. It's difficult to do that, but you still have today your phone just right in your hand. You still type with your phone, but I don't think.
I think the better question, though, of that scene was not, what do you text? Do you text you, or how do you do it? But do you text? Because then Paul was like, no, not really.
Not really.
And that's more telling. That's much more telling.
I
think particularly with that tribe.
Say that again. I missed it.
I said particularly with that tribe because the Gen Xers, because that's what really makes the difference between the generations is how you interact with the technology and or use it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like what you do with it per se. It's that you do use it. I do text people, or I prefer to text people.
That was
so much easier than calling, for example.
Oh, I wholeheartedly agree with you. There's a meme I've seen online where it says that really speaks to me. It's like their answering machine message is, if you need to leave a message, go ahead. But before you do, think about if this is something that can be texted to you.
That's great. Yes, I so agree.
And I live and die by the
Or like, can you just send me an email and I'll reply on Monday?
Oh yeah, and it's so much less pressure because on the phone it's like you're pressured. The pressure is there to respond right away and just to give an answer. But with a text or an email, you can read it and think about it and come up with the right answer before you.
Right, but that's what people don't like because they have to trust that you're going to reply.
Oh,
and I have to admit that I'm guilty. Sometimes I don't reply.
Right. I start thinking about this, and I never start thinking, and it just goes away.
And I do think that this is a stereotype, but I think generationally, I think people who are newer to using technology, so the Gen Xers and above, don't like placing that trust on other people as much. Like, oh, I can just text them and they'll probably reply eventually. They're much more uncomfortable if they want an answer. My parents are kind of, or I think dealing with parents, they can be this way. Mm-hmm. Well, you have to call and, get the answer right now.
Funny story about that. Cause the first thing I thought of was, but then you have to, you still have to trust that they're going to answer the phone, which there are plenty of people who don't because of this whole texting thing.
Caller ID, yeah.
Caller ID, yeah. Which brings me to the story that it reminded me of, because we were leaving church one day, and everyone was in the car except for my brother and my mom. And we saw him walk out the door and stand in the entryway, right before, walking out to the parking lot. So my mom called him, and we watched him pull the phone out of his pocket, look at the caller ID, and put it back in his pocket. And it was one of the most hilarious things I've ever seen. And we still give him a hard time for it today. Do you think the poll vote was smart or good, or what are your thoughts on that?
I was surprised at how angry Chris and Brett, right? The other two guys were that he got voted off, because could they not see? I thought it. I don't know if it was a smart move, but I think it was an obvious move.
I thought it was,
or maybe not even obvious. It was a logical. It made sense. Like, I didn't question it, because he was all like, "Oh, I can hunt fish," and he can't do anything. And he was like the old guy, and he was kind of trying to be bossy, and those type of people, especially in the early episodes, the first 3 to 4, always get voted off, and so you never want to be in. Or I think it's always stupid to be, unless you're like a super, super powerful person, which he wasn't. So I wasn't surprised by it, and I don't know. I don't know that it was the best move they could have made, but I understood it.
I thought it was interesting how easily the girls flipped. Just it was kind of a passing comment, and on one hand it made sense.
So the other target was
Cece, I believe, because she took too long on the balance beam.
Oh, right. Yeah, it was Cece. Yeah, sure. Her name, poor Cece. She keeps on coming back up every time.
And for almost no reason in the first episode.
Well, I want to talk about tonight's episode, so keep that thought.
Okay. Yeah, it's, Cece is getting a lot of heat for, I don't know. It's for not doing anything almost. It's just.
Well, she's like the scapegoat, or for whatever reason, or maybe there's a reason behind the scenes, but they seem to like to. Sometimes you have to have somebody to vote for, like just in your back pocket. Oh, we'll vote for Cece.
The easy vote.
Yeah, the easy vote, the person to vote on.
I don't think any of these votes are really easy. But I don't know. I've never actually gotten to play out there. So, and they talked about having an easy vote. Because that's part of what convinced Will to flip on Mari a couple episodes ago, was that Figgy would be an easy vote later. But what makes somebody an easy vote rather than anybody else?
Well, I think it's too premature to say, oh, they're an easy vote later. That's better like when you've narrowed it down and you have alliances, or stronger alliances at least.
Right.
Because then we have a bigger target, right? Like somebody's up here and we don't like this person, but if we get this one out, then it'll be easier. Like that's an easy vote. Or I think at this point though, because things are still changing so much,
right,
it's a much more dangerous prospect to say that, what was it, Figgy was the easy vote, or she would be an easy vote later.
I don't know. It's still really early in the game. So, let's talk about this week's episode. We had our first reward challenge.
Yeah, quite a reward for some people.
There was some steak and sausages. It sounds pretty good to me. Let's talk about the reward challenge. There was something pretty significant for our show that happened.
I think so. Yeah, go Michaela.
Michaela just
just ripped it off. Go for it.
And it's I would say commendable.
Well, it was kind of weird because she just all of a sudden like ripped it off.
She was.
Maybe I wasn't watching closely enough, but like I didn't totally see what was going on. Were they like grabbing? Because she had one of those like necky things.
It was one of those wrestling in the water, one of those wrestling challenges, and in those challenges, I know that from watching other seasons, and clothes can become a hindrance.
Right.
And I think that's what Michaela saw and what she was feeling, and
and she was like totally into the challenge. It wasn't about the clothes. It wasn't anything. She was like, "I'm gonna win."
Yeah,
I'm gonna go for it. And she's kind of cool. I kind of like her like that because she's kind of badass, sort of.
Yeah, I'm liking Michaela more. So I'm hope I kind of hope we kind of see this side of her more. Not even necessarily just the free the nipple side, but we want to see this challenge beast, I think.
Yeah, I think she could be that. But it was very interesting because she just went for it. But then so let's get to the dangerous bit of all of this, because she walked out of the water, all covering and everything.
Yeah.
Like, and I thought two things. I was like, okay, is she really embarrassed? Because I don't think she was. Or was she doing that because the show makes her, or what are the rules? Yeah,
and I don't know the rules. And I think, based on the show's history, I think the rules are whatever the castaways want the rules to be. So I think
initially, because Rich, whatever, from the first season, was just like totally walking around in the buff. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
But then nobody has ever really done it quite,
Not to his extent. No, you're right. We've seen a few. Max Dawson comes to mind from Survivor Worlds Apart. Tall skinny guy with a beard. Yeah.
And then you also get like blurring and challenges from like guys' shorts falling down and stuff. But
right, and that's fairly normal. Challenge wear and tear, I would say.
Right.
Or almost ironically, I would probably say that. But yeah, I think as far as Michaela goes, I don't think the arm wasn't out of embarrassment as much as it was more maybe I want to say modesty, just because I don't know, not everybody else.
Yeah, I think it was modesty. So like, if my shorts were ripped down and I was walking out of the water, I'd probably, cover my bits too, or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Like that's probably the natural reaction. So
I mean, yeah, there's.
But
I know that there are.
I think it's opening us up to like, or this conversation could go towards like, because I was watching that scene and I knew what was going to happen because I had seen the preview.
Right.
But then I started watching it, or I was like looking at the guys. So they run around camp in their underwear, essentially. Right. But then they all had on their board short trunks, whatever. Most of them. I think all of them, actually.
Well, what I've noticed lately is it takes them 2, 3, 4 episodes before they give them their swimsuits at all.
Is that what?
They have the marooning, and for about the first week or two, they let them live in their one outfit, and then they deliver their swimsuits at Tree Mail one day. So because you'll if you watch some of the more recent seasons, you'll notice that that first couple episodes, everyone's running around in their underwear, and then one episode, they'll show up at a challenge and everyone's got clean swimsuits on, because they finally got something clean to wear that isn't, they can, for some reason, especially for girls, for some reason, swimsuits are more modest than their underwear, even though it tends to be the same thing.
Yeah, well, that's what's kind of crazy, because it is totally the same thing. Yeah, the buffs, I think, partially exist for the sole sake that some of the girls can wear them over their chests, which is an interesting, maybe it's just a coincidence, but
I think it's probably more coincidence. I know from owning them and from talking to other people who own them, they did, and just from reading some of their product descriptions, they're multi-use. There's a lot of different ways you could wear a buff. So, I was about to go somewhere else, and I don't remember where I was going. We were talking about Michaela and modesty and
her tatas
and underwear versus swimsuits. And I think we hit everything on that. What about goings on at the Millennial Tribe? Most of the tribe seem to have gone goat hunting, which was interesting. We haven't seen a lot of large mammal hunting on Survivor in the past.
Right. The one exception I can think of is, what's the season where they killed the pig? Or the
that was my gosh, way back in season 2.
Oh no, it's surely more recent than that, I thought. Maybe not. No?
Mm-hmm. They caught a pig in one world, but I don't ever know that.
Did they not kill it?
I don't think they killed it.
Okay, maybe
so that's the only thing that I can think of is so it's Survivor the Australian Outback. Michael Skupin kills a pig, and that tribe was doing really well, and then he fell in the fire. So
yeah, that was sad.
So, but we didn't get to see much else on the goat front, mostly because what we did get to see was Adam finding the hidden immunity idol for the Millennial Tribe.
Yeah, surprising,
kind of. Little surprising. You never know from season to season who's going to find the immunity idol. Sometimes
he was, at least the way they portrayed it, he was working hardest to find it.
Yeah.
To the others.
Yeah, and sometimes we spend a lot of time on a player who's out looking for it, like Adam, and sometimes it just jumps out at somebody. I'm thinking of Ralph from season 22, Redemption Island, but Adam was very excited to find it. As a super fan, I can tell you that I would probably be just ecstatic.
Right. Well, and then we got the whole backstory with his mother with cancer and whatever else it was.
Right, and I don't know this for a fact, but I think based on some of his more recent tweets, I don't think she won that battle, unfortunately.
Oh, that's too bad.
So, if you guys are watching, go follow Adam Scott Klein on Twitter, because he's a cool guy, and he's a Survivor fan, and he's probably one of my favorites right now.
Yeah, he's totally. He was sort of in the background, I think,
Um,
first episode or two, and
his
I think with him finding the idol, he's really come to the front.
yeah,
But him and because we didn't really talk about him and Zeke being so they were pissed off.
they no, they were. Um, and you know, I totally understand where Zeke was coming from, trying to get Hannah to go away, because
And what was really interesting though was because then Hannah just dropped off. Like, where's Hannah? Is she on the show?
She's
like I don't know about your
I don't-
spreadsheet, but like I don't. Did she even have like a confessional?
probably not, because they spent a lot of time with Gen X this week.
That's true. It was primarily Gen X.
They tend to spend more time with the tribe that goes to tribal council and votes somebody out. But I do still like Hannah, and she's hilariously awkward.
Yes.
Yes.
Uncomfortably, which makes you want to watch even more.
Right. I feel like Hannah's almost maybe a bit of a train wreck. But she's just that way. And that's just how she is, and she likes talking about puppies and butts.
Right, but so if they didn't show Hannah, the person they have been, and you're right, they show the Gen X people more this week, but like it seemed like David was like every other scene interviewing him, or like his response to another interview, or
right. And David,
like, he was totally front and center this week.
Well, and David is the early leader right now in the confessional count.
Right, the spreadsheet.
He's got. I haven't had a chance to rewatch episode 4 yet, but following episode 3, I think he's got like 8 confessional. He's 8 talking points above the person in second. I'm not looking at it. I don't have it right in front of me.
I was about to have a confessional with Zach about the spreadsheet. So how do you like have a tally as you watch? Like
yeah.
How does this work?
No, absolutely. That's exactly how it works. I grab a sheet of paper off of my printer. I write down their names, and I do tally marks every time they get to talk.
Okay, so if anybody's listening and hasn't seen his tally sheet, go follow him on Twitter or wherever you post that stuff.
At Dakota Zulu on Twitter. That's where you can find me. I have not. Let's see.
Actually, in retrospect, I would have never thought to do this, but I think it is kind of interesting because the more I watch it, it's like, oh, so the more these people are on here, the more likely they are to be in the thick of it, so to speak. Right? Or that's sort of the idea, right?
I've been doing this for the last. I did this for Cambodia and Koh Rong, and the theory behind it, at least when I started, was that the winner would probably have at least one confessional per episode. And in Cambodia, Survivor Second Chance, that proved true. Jeremy, Spencer, and Kelly Wentworth all had at least one confessional per episode. I also count the talking, those that get to talk at Tribal Council, because we don't always get to hear from everybody there either.
Oh, well, speaking of Tribal Council this week, Cece said nothing, I don't think.
I don't think she did either. So where was I? Hang on, let me just finish this point out. So I count the confessionals, when they're on screen talking, and whenever they get to talk at Tribal Council, they get a tally mark, and that's how I count. And right now, the leader is David after 3 episodes, He was at 19, whereas looks like Figgy and Michaela are in second at 11.
That's interesting. So Figgy and
the two who are conflicting.
Yeah, and Michaela.
Because Survivor loves drama.
I'm not surprised that David, because I was just talking about it. He was like in every other scene, especially this week. So
yeah, no, he totally is.
But it's interesting that how other people sort of drop off. Because like Hannah, where's Hannah this week?
Right, and a lot of it is, as far from production standpoint, it's where does the story go this week and who is involved, and David has been in the thick of everything. It seems like,
Well, in the thick of it, but okay. So we spent a lot of time with Gen X this week, though. I don't know if you have your tally there. What about Ken, though? Because we haven't really talked about Ken. Because I think he's the interesting person of the week of this episode.
I haven't done, like I said, I haven't done this week yet. I'm looking.
I just think it's interesting because Ken
is one of the few right now who still have at least one confessional per episode, and I know he got some yesterday, last night's show, so he's still in the running.
Because if they voted off Joe because he was like being bossy or trying to control the tribe, and so then so we haven't quite got to tribal council, but so they ended up voting off what's her name?
Lucy.
Lucy. So they voted off Lucy for the same idea, but Ken is essentially the same type of person. He's wanting to rule everything, and when somebody's stepping up in his way, because that's why he wanted Lucy out.
That's an interesting perspective, because what I think I have to disagree with you a little bit. Just because it just feels to me, it just from my perspective, what I've seen is that Ken just doesn't like being bossed around. He wants a little more involvement. He wants his opinion considered. That's what I'm.
I think he really wants to be the leader, though. So I don't think I think he's going to rub them over. I think he's going to be easy vote out soon.
You think
if they keep on losing, especially.
And it's because
I saw it coming out this week. I saw it coming out this week because he was trying to bulldoze over, with all those votes, and like his personality is just very strong and rubbing, and he's like, well, we've got to do it this way, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah,
although it's interesting because initially he was kind of trying to play the softy, I don't like being called a Ken doll, blah, 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 stuff like that.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't like being called a Ken doll either.
Well, but he is a Ken doll. Well, and speaking of naked people, so he's probably the most naked, right?
Probably, besides Michaela.
Well, okay. So, right, but I'm just saying, like, in general, like, he's shirtless most of the time.
Okay, I see where you're going. I think I probably...
You see where I mean?
Yeah.
Like, his type of underwear that he wears is the more form-fitting, so to speak, of the show. I'm just saying, and I'm curious if we're going to talk about naked people. So he's probably, so why do you think, or okay, here's the question. So why do you think he might be, is he more confident, body confident? Is that just his persona? I think because this is some of the questions I've been thinking about when I've been watching this, especially from our, angle.
Right, from our angle. I think isn't he a model? I'm pretty sure he and Rachel
Maybe I don't remember.
who were voted out.
Here, wait, I've got it on here.
I think they were both models. I know from watching.
Yes, he is a model according to his bio.
According to his bio, and I know from watching one of Rachel's intro video that she posed for Playboy. That doesn't necessarily mean full nude, but that's what they're famous for.
Right.
So, but again, they're both models, and I think that they're in professions where they've become probably more comfortable with themselves.
Do you think, in watching the show from our angle, there's any bias towards it's okay for the guys to be running around in their underwear, but the girls are more covered, or vice versa, or what do you think?
That's hard to say, because I know there are plenty of people who would say that that Survivor loves to cast their beautiful girls to run around in bikinis. I don't necessarily see it that way. I know there are beautiful women who have been on Survivor, but I don't. It's hard to say. Ask me a question again, because I don't.
Same question.
Yeah, the same question. I want to make sure I understand it and I'm thinking it through.
No, I'm just saying, do you think there's a bias? So
a bias towards
so there's this philosophy between free the nipple, right? Why can guys walk around without a shirt on and it's legal in most places, and girls can't? And so what I'm just thinking or asking is, do you think around the camp and on the show, just in general, do you think we see this bias being played out? Because like the guys walk around in their underwear, they don't wear any shirts, they don't, and I think it's more across all guys on the show. Like even David, who's probably maybe the scrawniest or the least, but he's still like walking around in his underwear sometimes.
Right.
He's also probably the most clothed at times of the men.
Right.
But how does that compare to the girls, for example? With them, because they are obviously much more likely, well, most likely, only likely to use the buffs to cover their chest.
Right. Okay.
So
I think.
Do you see where I'm going with this? Like, what does this say about the bias of this sort of issue?
I don't necessarily think that this is that any. I don't necessarily think that anybody is making them stay dressed. I think that most of these people are probably used to that lifestyle, used to the textile lifestyle, and they're used to having the certain standards and dressing a certain way around people. I know from talking to people about nudism and naturism that there are a lot of people out there who don't consider themselves nudists, who spend a lot of time at home without any clothes on. But they don't think of themselves as nudists because they don't realize that that's what they're doing. They don't realize that that's what nudism is just being naked just for the heck of it, almost. Just because it's comfortable, because you enjoy it. I don't, we've not seen a lot of nudity as like through Survivor's history. We've seen Hatch, we've seen Max and Shireen more recently. And I think probably another one of the more famous incidents is Jenna and Heidi in the Amazon stripping off for chocolate and peanut butter. But there have been occasions where people, just men and women, have just taken their clothes off, and they don't really talk about why. They just did it, and they were just walking around naked for one reason or another.
Well, in this week, the reason I think I don't remember how we talked about it, but like Michaela did it because it was in the way,
right?
And she was just like, "Screw that!"
Right,
and I want to get this done.
Clothing can get in the way, and I've,
yeah, and that's sort of one of the most organic, natural, if you will, ways. Like that was a perfect response.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree with you, and I know that I don't know how on topic or off topic this is or not, but I know from recent experience of going swimming and being in the water is a lot more comfortable without a suit than with it. It's very confining.
Well, running through water with board shorts on is terribly difficult.
Well, I can tell you,
especially with waves and stuff like they were dealing with this week.
Oh yeah, if these, especially if the guys, with those big baggy board shorts, like you said, if they had done this challenge skinny dipping, it would have been a lot easier to move through that water.
Right, and those kinds of challenges where you're like wrestling or like body contact, trying to obstruct people, because if you have clothes on, which I assume is what was happening with Michaela, they were grabbing her neck strap or whatever.
It becomes a grabbing point, and
totally,
there's something to latch onto that is could potentially get damaged. But it becomes a nuisance. So we'll see, I suppose. I've always got my fingers crossed that we're going to see some skinny dipping on Survivor. That's a good way to make a fan out of me. But let's get to the immunity challenge. We touched on it a little bit.
Oh, that's right, we did.
So what are your thoughts?
Well, my first thought was, so if you have to put somebody and like lift them up, like I just thought it was weird that they put Chris, the Gen X,
right,
which in the end they ended up, well, no, they
ended up doing decently. I mean, they ended up gaining a nice lead with Chris.
It's just interesting how the teams always choose who does what, and sometimes I know it's prescribed. Like they did this last time, so you can't do blah blah blah. Like there are some rules behind it, but still, like it didn't seem there were any rules, but they still put him first, and that just didn't seem very.
Yeah, and I think it didn't make sense to me, like why he should have been an anchor.
Right, for pulling them back. Or that's what
they had a lot of they had a lot of small people pulling on that lift, on that rope or whatever. And I guess they're not really small. I'm thinking of Jessica specifically. But I think one of the bigger reasons why they picked Chris to go in the chair was because he probably, I think he's got some football in his background, and so he knew that he'd be able to move over some of those obstacles a lot faster.
Yeah, maybe. I still think he's one to watch, even though he's sort of on the bottom of that pack still. With Paul being voted up. He's smart and he's a huge physical threat. Or he seems to be smart. He's a lawyer, I think is his background.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and I don't know when the last time he played football was. He talked about some football
but he was pretty dominant in the reward challenge. I mean, physically dominant.
He was a beast. He was a beast, and I think Zeke laid it out, and you said it best. Like, the guys on Gen X are huge.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't think even I would be would do very well against that Gen X tribe, against those guys in the wrestling match or something like that.
Yeah, well, he and Brett seem to be physically just like strong.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I think that's the only reasoning I can think of is just because he's got that athletic background. He was able to move through the obstacle quickly, and they ended up doing well with Chris.
They did well.
So it was a surprising move, but it worked out. To an extent. They did not win that challenge, though.
True.
So we get back to camp, and Lucy's calling the shots and wants to vote out.
Always a bad idea. Gosh.
It was the funniest thing happened last night. When Lucy was talking about being a tiger mom. I was watching with my parents, and everyone disagreed. Like, no, that's not how Survivor works. That doesn't work for you. And what my mom ended up saying was, "You lead, you bleed." I laughed because that's
when you lead, you bleed like blood.
Yes. And I thought that was funny, but I also thought it was on point, because that's kind of the way it goes in Survivor. I tweeted it out right away. It was
good for her.
Yeah,
I think that's true, because that was Paul's problem last week.
That was the entire problem.
Don't you think?
Yeah. So, yeah.
So somehow, like, David running around trying to manipulate everything, but not leading, is less threatening than somebody who's actually saying, "Yes, let's do this."
People,
which is probably the reverse of what is truly more threatening.
People don't like being told what to do. And when you've got these social games and if you're telling people what to do, that's what can get you voted out. People don't like being bossed around or, in certain cases, threatened, to make certain moves or cast certain votes or just play a certain way in a challenge.
However, Lucy was pretty effective.
Yeah.
Until
yeah.
So I think that's the health.
Lucy gathered the votes, but then in comes David.
Yeah, wow. What I was not expecting that. I mean, that was a pretty full
major
move.
When they showed the review at the very beginning of the episode, one of the first things they talked about was David found a hidden immunity idol, and that kind of tipped me off. Like, we're talking about this so it's probably going to come up again tonight. So I thought, okay, so we're probably going to see David use an idol. I was not really expecting this idol play, the play for Jessica. Do you think that was a good move, a bad move? I'm
just more curious about the move because I was kind of confused at first. I was like, oh my gosh, he's going to use it on himself? That's so stupid because like maybe I just wasn't really aware of what was going on. But then when he used it, I was like, okay, so is that like one of the most masterful moves ever? Because he stacked it, he let everyone think that they should vote out Lucy on purpose. Or so that he could say, or vote out Jess. You know what I mean?
Like, yeah, I know what you mean.
He did that on purpose so that he could save her, or did he just happen to do that and think that maybe if he did that, it would save himself later?
That's an interesting thought.
I don't want to give him too much credit with this. I have to admit.
I think David's playing. We know David's playing a hard game, and
totally.
And he's, I don't know if. I think Jessica's obviously in some kind of debt. We don't know. I don't know, how indebted she feels to him though, because Survivor is a game of backstabbing. So
why would he have? So if he did it, why did he want Jess to say so bad? I think that was another question. Like I was a little confused afterwards. I was like, oh, well, why does he want Jess so badly that he'd give up a whole idol? Because he would have been fine.
He had his own 6 supposedly the previous last week after the vote. There were 6 of them who voted out Paul. And then this week, it blew up, and 4 of the remaining 5 were ready to vote out Jessica because of the move. I think the consequences of this is that Jessica now sees that her tribe turned on her, her alliance turned on her, and she's still in the game. And now, she trusts. I think she probably trusts David a little more now, just because she knows you got my back.
Yeah, she trusts him, but so he did that on purpose?
I don't know if.
And if he did, he must have done it on purpose. But why did he want her trust so bad? I think that's where my big question was. Like, why does he want? Why was he willing to? Because that's a huge sacrifice on his part to give up an idol for somebody else this early. I can't think of another time that maybe an idol's been played earlier, like with Russell or somebody. Early.
Yeah.
But definitely not on somebody else.
Heroes versus villains. When the villains were splitting the vote, 3-3-3, and Tyson flipped, and Russell played his idol for Parvati. That's probably the big one.
But that was a much more strategic. I mean, that was a
more strategic play, though. I think because that was.
Yeah, and there was much more.
There was a Russell's alliance, and then there was. It wasn't as. It wasn't. The wind wasn't as blowing as back and forth on the villains tribe as it is on Takali.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it'll be an interesting move, and I'm curious to see how it, what the results are, how this ends up playing out.
Well, I think the most revealing result will be like the first scene next week. Like what happens when they get back to camp. Because Jessica's eyes were just like
Jessica. Oh yeah, I love.
She was like totally.
I love Jessica. She was just like.
She was like deer in the headlights.
Deer in the headlights. She was completely shocked that any of this was happening. First, shocked first that David was playing an idol. Shocked twice that David was playing an idol for her. Shocked 3 times
that
she was the one being voted out.
Poor Jessica.
Oh man. She's one of my favorites though. And she's been really if you're not following her on Twitter, follow Jessica. Let me see if I can find.
I was gonna say, give us that shout out. What's her handle?
At Jessica Lewis 89. Follow Jessica Lewis. And for earlier, just follow Hannah Shapiro at Hannah Lil Nessen, Nessen. Jessica, Hannah, Adam, follow those guys. They're cool. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting show next week. Because we've got the aftermath of the Jessica vote, and then
in the preview they showed us that the final, the real switch up is going to happen.
The real now we're finally switching up. At 16. So you think, are we going to do this? Are we going to do the switch like a normal switch? Is it going to be, switched up to, 2 tribes of 8? Will it be?
Well, they showed the typical
3 or 4 tribes, or what?
I don't know. They showed the typical. So both teams arrive and they drop their buffs.
Drop your buffs.
Which usually reminds me of the typical situation where they end up drawing and reforming the 2 teams. But
right.
I don't foresee them like splitting into 3. But maybe I don't know.
It'll be an interesting dynamic, especially because it's 16. Like even if they were gonna split into more tribes, how would you split 16 into 3? It would have to be,
unless they did it.
It would have to be 2 tribes of 5 and 1 tribe of 6.
Or if they do some like modified with like, so they did the summit. How many were in the summit? 4 or
4 from each tribe.
So unless they do some sort of like variation on the summit, like they separate 2 people from each tribe off on their own or something. I don't know.
It's gonna be interesting, to say the least. I'm, as always, I'm looking forward to the next episode. Always looking forward to more Survivor. It's the high point of my week. It really is.
Me too. I enjoy it.
So, any other thoughts?
No.
Yeah, I think we've covered everything. We've covered 2 weeks worth of stuff.
Yeah.
Hopefully next week there won't be any major disasters that keep us from broadcasting, and we'll finally get a regular weekly schedule.
So we can like talk about one episode.
Talk about one episode at a time.
We might be a little more focused that way.
Yeah, we've been kind of all over the place because we've got so much to talk about. So I think that's all for the night. We've discussed everything under the sun, I believe. So we will see you next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. And we just want to remind everybody out there that clothing is optional, but nudity is not required. And we'll see you later.